This is the Build Your Path podcast, where we explore how people get into their careers in the built environment. Today's guest is Kelly Ennis. Kelly has over 20 years' experience in the industry and is the founder and managing principal of the Verve Partnership. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Shapiro and Duncan. Build the lifestyle you deserve. Welcome on into the Build Your Path podcast, hosted by myself, Matthew Pine. I am with my guest today,
Kelly Ennis. Coolest thing I've ever done, or the unique thing I've ever done in my career. I don't think there is any one piece, one thing. I think that early in my career, designing studios and space for MTV for a young designer, that was pretty cool and was a really great opportunity. I had lived in Los Angeles at the time, and I was very lucky to have started my career in LA. So got to do some really cool things out there. And then when we moved back east, starting the Verve Partnership definitely ranks as the coolest thing ever. We've been in business for 10 years, and we're just really fortunate to have worked on some really amazing projects here in Baltimore.
All right. So Kelly, if you want to walk us through a little bit of maybe your early life, how did you get here? What pathway did you really follow to get where you wanted to be?
So I got my first set of Lincoln Logs when I was 8 years old, and I really never looked back. I've always been very design and architecture focused since that moment in time. My dad taught me how to draw our house with a pencil on graph paper, and really just followed in his footsteps a bit from a design and a creative capacity. And I grew up in rural Pennsylvania and moved to Baltimore to go to MICA for interior architecture. And I've never looked back.
And when you went to MICA, you knew exactly what you wanted to do and had a total game plan prepared?
Yep, I had a total game plan. I applied to design schools all across the East Coast, and was thankful enough to get into all of them. And MICA afforded me a really sweet scholarship, and they just had a really strong program in design and interior architecture, and graduated with a degree in interior architecture in the 90s. So yeah, it was like I said, never looked back.
So for our listeners, maybe they may not know what it is that you do. Could you kind of explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because nobody really, my parents still don't know what technically that I do. So my degree is in interior architecture. There are also other degrees within the interior environment. There's interior design. You can get a bachelor's of science, you can get a BFA, you can get a BA, but essentially we design from the inside out. And it's interior design and interior architecture. So we do everything on the inside of a building. We just don't build the buildings.
Who would you say has been a mentor or maybe mentors in your field?
So I think there's, been a lot of influential people in my life that got me here. I credit my high school art teacher first and foremost, because she was the one who encouraged me to go to design school and focus on a path of design and interiors. I was thankful enough to work at HOK when I was in Los Angeles, and Pam Light, who is a principal at HOK. HOK is a global design firm with offices, all over the place. And she was just fantastic from the standpoint. But some of my favorite architects who focus on interiors and some ground up are the likes of Joey Shimoda and Clive Wilkinson. But it was Pam Light who really, helped me shape my career in design and strategy.
So how would you describe, you mentioned kind of already what you do, but how would you describe how interior architects, designers, and strategists, how are they an integral part of the built environment?
So our firm focuses on the strategy of space, how people use space, how brand and purpose is reflected through space. The people piece is really the culture of the space that starts to take shape. We primarily focus in corporate workplace, so offices and headquarters are our main clients. So we really have a little bit of an organizational development bent as a precursor to the built environment. We spend a lot of time researching the organizations that we're working with, what makes them different and how they tick. Why are their people different than, in different market sectors? Why are lawyers different than, technologists? And why are technologists different than medical professionals? And really understand the culture of every organization that we work with and the unique nature of what they do for a living. And that really starts to inform and shape the way that people work and how people work differently. And how that plays into the built environment is really, it's just a comprehensive, approach to the interior environment. So we're not designing for design's sake. We're not decorating by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very comprehensive look at everything from the inside out, from how you sequence, like what is your sequence? How do you enter to the building? How do you experience the receptionist? What is your experience with the receptionist? And how does space really support those experiences within the context of the built environment, the built office space?
And maybe as a bit of a follow-up, do you see like COVID-19 affecting how office spaces are built and designed, especially maybe if you need a retrofit?
Yeah, so that's a really good question that we're having a lot of conversations about right now. And I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. It would be irresponsible of me to say that there's one thing. You're hearing a lot, well, the office is going away, or everybody's going to cut their real estate in half, or everybody's going to double their real estate because nobody's going to want to share space anymore. And I really think that there are some things that can be taken care of immediately as it applies to safety, because I think that has to be our number one concern as problem solvers, is how do we keep our employees safe and how do our clients keep their employees safe? And what we're seeing really is it's really going to be about indoor air quality and how indoor air quality impacts, like we're in office, we spend 87% of our time indoors. And the air quality that we breathe in commercial office buildings is not up to par with the indoor air quality that you breathe in a medical office building or a hospital. So we really need to improve the indoor air quality within commercial office buildings and commercial office space. That's going to be, I think, one of the number one things to be affected by COVID-19. In addition, I think touchless everything, automated doors, there's already, the technology is out there. It just really needs to be implemented on a holistic approach within an entire building. So it's elevator buttons, it's automatic flush valves on your toilets, hand sinks, like everything is going to be some sort of touchless something. And that level of automation really needs to be addressed. I think as it applies to the office experience, I don't think anybody should really be stating if it's going away, if it's going in half, or if it's staying the same, because I think it's going to be very, very dependent on the user and the market sector. I think what's going to work for a law firm is going to be very different than, a corporate headquarters, which is going to be very different from a general contracting office. So I think it's just going to be based on the culture of the market, who owns or uses the real estate that we're in. But behaviors definitely need to change. And we can help, we address that. Design can address that.
What is the most unique or maybe the coolest thing you've ever done in your career?
So I'm going to precursor what I had initially said, because actually prior to design, I graduated in the recession of the early 90s, where then and have been through a couple of recessions since then. This one not excluding this one that we're in, but I actually took off and waited tables in Key West for about 3 years as a precursor to design, because I couldn't find a job, and that really was that was cool. I graduated college and I moved to Key West to wait tables. And that, I think, really helped shape my resiliency in doing what I'm doing right now. Kind of, through the course of life, I wound up living in Los Angeles for about 8 years as a young designer. And it was at a time when the economy was recovering from the two recessions of the 90s. And really had a lot of fantastic opportunities when I worked at HOK, designing studios, working with MTV, went to the MTV Music Awards a couple of times because they were our clients. So it really puts a lovely impression on a young designer when you get to know your clients and form those kinds of relationships that they're like, oh, hey, you want a couple tickets to yeah, sure. I mean, just kind of cool, right? So, we brought our whole team a couple of times to some really cool things that you just wouldn't normally think of. When we moved back east, I started the Verve Partnership 10 years ago, and we're very thankful to have worked on some pretty amazing projects. But I think one of a really nice catalyst was working with Betamore, which was one of the original co-working spaces, by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And that was a really, I think, pivotal space, because at that point, nobody really knew what co-working was. And I think the founders of Betamore did an awesome job in really building a community, and the design supported everything that they were doing in both locations. So I think that was a pretty cool out of the gate kind of project for us when we started the firm.
Yeah, and I think your initial point that you made is a good one for our young listeners, because some people get out of school and they don't know necessarily what they want to do right away, or they're kind of lost. So it's good to hear that you took 3 years essentially off of your career path and still ended up as successful as you are. So I think that's a good point you made.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
What makes you get up in the morning? What brings you joy to your work?
So that's a good question. We were chatting in the office before this whole mess happened. And I said to one of our younger designers, I said, if when I die, I would really I just really want everybody to know how much I cared about their space, their organization, and their people. And so, what gets me going in the morning is really people and relationships, our team, the relationships that we have internal at the Verve Partnership, and relationships that we have outside. I have a very old and dear friend and I've known her for years. She's actually my college roommate at MICA, so I've known her for over 30 years. And she says, Kelly, you are the friend who just will not let go. And when I think our clients are a testament to that. I still talk to the guy from MTV, and I met him when I was in my early 30s. So at this point, that's almost 20 years ago. And we exchanged Christmas cards, and that's what gets me up in the morning is building relationships and maintaining them. And I've got some really great old friends and some really amazing clients.
So as the next question for you, this doesn't necessarily have to be, in your professional career, but who is the smartest person that you know, and what do you learn from them?
That's a funny question, because I don't know who the smartest person who's the smartest person I know and why. It's a hard question. I'm going to go with my kids. I have two small, they're not small actually anymore. I have two boys, ages 12 and 15. And those kids are smart. The world that they are living in and the problems that they are going to be solving, they are building that knowledge base now.
Yep.
And I'm inspired by what they're able to do in their lives. Like, we've never, lived through a pandemic. They're, 12 and 15. They're going to know what to do. They're going to be the ones, who save our lives and solve all the problems. So I'm going to go with my kids, because just watching them is just a pretty cool thing.
It's a cool answer. Not what I expected, but I like it.
Good.
Speaking of young people, like if a young person came up to you today and asked, if they should pursue a pathway in design or in interior architecture, what would you tell them?
So I, along with the majority of my peers, will say run. And it's a committed profession. You have to be committed to it because, the world is hard and design is easy. But it's the commitment to design and problem solving, I think, is really what sets the interior design and architecture apart. We are problem solvers. I think there's also a misnomer that, we get paid $1 gazillion because we don't. But I would encourage them to follow their heart. We had a lovely young intern over the summer, and she really wanted to go into hospitality design. And we don't do hospitality design we can, but it's not our core competency. And she came and she worked with us for the summer, and I introduced her to a couple of other firms in DC, because she really wanted to work in DC and she really wanted to do hospitality. And when she left at the end of the summer, she's graduating today. Actually, today is her graduation day. And I offered her a job before COVID. We're still going to see if we can't bring her on at some point over the summer. But she's like, I don't want to do hospitality anymore, Kelly. I want to work with you and your team. Which is pretty cool, right? Was just like, I was like, oh my God, I almost cried. But I think, in being, leading people and encouraging people to try new things is key in design. We don't do residential for a reason. We don't, people who do, hospitals don't do workplace. It's really, there's many, many different opportunities. So long-winded way to say, explore many different options and find what drives you. And the interesting thing about Kate was she thought it was going to be hospitality. And what she realized, it was really just about the people that you work with. And I think that's where you find your sweet spot.
As a bit of a wrap up for you, I know you just mentioned you don't make $1 gazillion, in doing what you're doing. Yeah. But what are some of the rewards? What are some of the benefits that you reap in your position?
Well, tactically speaking, we don't make a poor living.
Sure.
But I think I'm just going to go, right back to relationships. I think the perks and the experiences that we have as an industry, Visit Baltimore is one of our clients, and they're just like the coolest people ever. And going to opening day with them is just really cool. They're all about Baltimore. They're living and breathing Baltimore. And hey, Kelly, we have extra tickets to opening game. Do you want to go with us? Yes. Oh my God, the project's over. And yes, we totally want to go with you. So to build, the perk is the relationship. Because that's all we need, right? The perk will come after the relationship, really. It's just, we go on trips, we do cool things, we get our work published, which is the coolest thing, that you're being recognized and rewarded for the spaces that you design. Like that's the biggest rush ever. It starts off on a piece of paper as a little sketch, and now it's actually built and people are working in it, and you win awards, and it's just that's a big rush
when everything comes to fruition.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yep. Really appreciate you coming on, Kelly.
Sure. Cool. Thanks. I appreciate it.
If you want to learn more about Build Your Path podcast or the built environment overall, go ahead and visit buildyourpath.org. Another big thank you to our guest, Kelly Ennis from the Verve Partnership. Once again, this episode was brought to you by Shapiro & Duncan. build the lifestyle you deserve. Build Your Path podcasts are produced by the Maryland Center for Construction, Education, and Innovation. I'm Matt Pine. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.